Welcome aboard the PowerUp with Manal podcast, your go-to source for inspiring entrepreneurship, leadership, and mental fitness development. Get ready to push your limits mentally and come away feeling like a turbocharged version of yourself. Let's power up our lives. On this week's episode, I am so honored to present Machen MacDonald, founder of ProBrilliance Leadership Institute. Machen's business is focused on performance coaching, helping people gain clarity and confidence. If you are here to power up your life, Machen is here to help you find your peak. He talks about mindset, leadership, how to level up your state of consciousness, and so much more. Get ready to question the status quo, get in your feels just a little bit, and start to identify how to find your why. Machen, thank you so much for joining the Power Up with Manal podcast. When I first heard you speak in one of the networking events that we're part of, you embodied everything that I was thinking about when I was putting this podcast together. It wasn't just about, leadership and process improvement and financials. It was about mindset, energy, motivation, mental clarity, heightening your conscious being. And you sort of embodied all that. And I'm so excited, to have you here. I also love that, you sort of put energy at the forefront, which, usually people are a little scared of my energy. So I know I could bring it with you. So thank you for being on the show. If you could take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah. So thanks, Manal. That was awesome. And super glad to be here. In a nutshell, I've had the privilege of being able to coach small business owners and people in the financial services business for over the last 20 years. And I guess the bottom line is I help them bring their A game to their hero's journey. They've got a call to adventure. They're ready to break out and take another step. They're already successful, but maybe they've been camping out on the success plateau for a while, and now they're ready for another climb. And they've got to kind of corral their mojo and their confidence and their certainty to get back at it, and that's where we get to play.
Yeah, I love that. So you started this coaching business a while ago. It's been about a couple decades now. What was sort of the trigger that you kind of sat there and you're like, this is my calling. This is what I need to do?
Yeah. Before I jumped into coaching, I was in financial services. I had my own practice, and then I also was responsible for helping other financial advisors grow their business, right? Generate more leads, convert those leads, build their systems and so forth. And everything was going great. And then our company got acquired, and they didn't quite know what to do with me. And so they said, hold tight, you got good cred, and we'll find a place for you. I'm like, okay, great. And meanwhile, my phone started to blow up, because what happened is people kind of started to move to other companies, and they'd bring their people with them, and they'd call me and they'd say, hey, Mach, we've got a budget over here. I need your help to help us do what you did back when we were working together. And it just kind of took on a life of its own. And I informed my current company, I'm going to do some outside consulting. And they're like, okay, great. Just stay tight. I'm like, okay. And,
okay.
It's like, I wasn't quite sure what that all meant, but, I just kind of started getting clients along the way. And they refer me to more people because they were getting such great results. And, if I hear nothing else from my clients, it's, I wish we would have hired you sooner.
Yeah. That's great. During this time, why do you feel bringing your A game or being at your peak, like you say, having energy or starting with energy matters?
Well, in a nutshell, Manal, everything is energy, right? It doesn't start or stop. It just changes form.
I love
So if
that.
somebody's experience is not of their liking, they can change it simply through their thoughts, right? Our thoughts drive our emotions. Think of emotion as energy in motion. based on our emotions, we take action or we have a certain behavior, and that action or behavior or lack thereof gets us a result. So it's a cycle, and we can control that cycle at any point, right? We may not be able to affect situation or circumstances that we find ourselves in, right? I mean, things happen, but we always have the power to choose the healthiest perspective from which to operate, right? Nothing has any meaning except the meaning we assign to it. So if we're not feeling how we want to feel, we can reframe that meaning, start to condition it, and move forward. So one of the things I tell my clients is, nothing happens to us, right? It doesn't happen to our detriment. It happens for our benefit. And like Einstein used to say, whatever we say to ourselves before we look at something determines what we see. So we've really got to manage this up here. 99% of the success or failure of a small business owner is the mindset.
It's all mindset. It's all mindset. I actually studied a lot of Buddhist philosophy when I was very young, like I think at the age of 17, 18. And the one line that always resonated with me in Buddhism, the core foundation states that you are what your thoughts derive or deliver, right? You are what you think. And it's so true. But it's so easy to say. And it's interesting because so like you're talking about, ancient philosophy to sort of mid-age philosophy with Einstein and then move forward. This is something that's repeated in history, right? Like it's not new, yet it is the most difficult thing for a human to do, control their emotions, right? Like that is the biggest challenge we face. And I know some people when they hear this, right? Or if someone's listening and they're listening to this and they're going through a certain moment, and I'm sure you get this, the side eye, the rolling of the eye, the sighing, the, oh my gosh, here he goes, yapping about, the brain and mindset. And people, it's easier to avoid and it's easy to shut out. What do you tell individuals? How do you get through and help people see that you can control it? Because we've all been there. Like nobody's perfect. I have lost control of my emotions at certain points in my life. And I'm just kind of like, what the heck am I doing? Like, what's going on? Like, I'm on this roller coaster. I know it's not healthy. Like I'm seeing, like I'm watching myself and I'm like, oh my God, why are you talking? Why are you doing this? Like how do we help ourselves?
Great question. To your point, this has been around since the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? All the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Plato, Jesus, going way back, they all talked about, things are going to happen. How do you accept it, right? There's certain things we just can't change. We have power to change things. Are we willing to do it? And then understanding the difference of all of it. And so, I think if we can befriend our emotions, if we can befriend that inner voice, that critical voice, and remember that there's a wise part of us that's been on the planet for a few years, and it knows, right? It knows what growth and expansion and love is all about. But then there's these other voices, we can call them the gremlin or the critic or sometimes the ego. Its job is to keep us alive. And when I say us, keep its current self-concept of who it thinks we are alive, right? And so it's not necessarily who we even think we are that holds us back. It's who we think we're not. So when those voices come in, it's not trying to cancel them out. It's not trying to shame ourselves for having them. We're all going to have them. It's part of the human experience. It's a primal element. Thank God that we have it, because if we didn't and our ancestors didn't, we wouldn't exist. Right? It was the spidey senses that got us into fight or flight, hearing the rustle in the grass that was,
right.
A tiger. But today there really isn't a tiger in the grass. But when we're talking with a boss and they're looking at us or they're showing disappointment, danger, right? The amygdala goes in and starts to shut everything down. We can't even think straight. And, the emotion is fear. And so we have to recognize that sooner rather than later when we kick into fear. Okay, what's my algorithm or formula or recipe for getting myself back online to my wise self. And so part of it is recognizing and even anticipating those times when we might get emotionally hijacked,
Right. Oh,
right?
I love that.
How do we bring ourselves back? Because it's going to happen. It
It's
happens
going
to
to
me, and I
happen. Yes.
practice and teach this stuff. The trick is when we do get knocked off, how can we get back online with our neocortex, our thinking brain, quicker, right? So I'm all about emotions. Emotions are great because they're like the gauges on our dashboard to let us know where our thinking is, right? Because again, our thoughts drive our emotions.
So how do you, interestingly, right? How do you help people balance sort of the pendulum between having the right emotions or empathy, EQ, emotional intelligence with, logic, process, forward thinking, strategy, right? Because it's interesting how there was a point where leadership was deemed to be type A, but that type A pendulum sort of swung towards just being this like, machine, almost like a robot. And that didn't work out. We've learned lessons, right? That doesn't work in society. That doesn't work in leadership. People do not, you know, have an affluent sort of leadership style. When they do that, people don't stay with them. How do you help people learn that balance?
Great question. So part of it is we've got to know ourselves, right? We have to understand what our mission and our purpose is. I call it a permission slip to succeed, purposeful mission,
Oh, I love your
right?
puns.
So, so if we're clear on why we're on this big blue marble and we bring that into each segment of our day, right? The challenge is most people, they wake up, their feet hit the ground and they're checking emails and they're off and running and they're already in a high speed wobble. So what we want to do is we want to bookend our days and have very clear routines and habits at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, because that's really where we only have the most control. The middle is pretty much a whirlwind, but I'll share with you that you can even affect that. So most people, they feel like they're sprinting a marathon, but they have no idea which mile they're on or where the finish line is. And it's exhausting. So what we do is we set intentions for each segment of the day. So in other words, you you have an appointment with a client. Okay, during that segment, that hour, let's say, how do I want to be? What do I want to do? And what do I need to have? And just get clear for that segment of the day, because we all have a capacity, right? Ability. And then there's our performance. And what we want to do is we want to close that gap. So our performance is at our ability. Okay. To the degree that that gap exists, we're unhappy. Unhappy people are not productive people. Okay. So the way to close it is, okay, during this segment, what do I need to do? How do I need to be? What do I need to have? Get clear, see the end, and then work from there and go. And then for the next segment, maybe it's writing a paper or doing some research or showing up to a podcast, right? I want to show up to the different segments of my day in different ways. Sometimes I need to be creative and fun and playful, right? I podcast. There's
Right?
other times where I maybe need to be very curious and compassionate for a client. There's other times where I need to be creative and insightful and open for writing an article. So we want to approach each segment with everything we need. What do we need to do? How do we need to be? What do we need to have?
You need to be transformational. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why some of these, not all, because some I've done a really good, well-rounded, holistic job, but some of these assessments that we take, behavioral assessments, I always find it interesting when they're very like one-sided, because I'm like, but yeah, you could be that at a certain moment. But I feel like you reach sort of that ultimate level of leadership when you're able to assess situations, like you said, and bring what is needed to the table to create progress or be at your peak performance. I love the way you said that. Thank you.
So for me, I think it's because I'm probably, a serial entrepreneur, small business owner myself. When I was a senior in high school, I started a water ski school,
Oh, you
right? And I
did?
negotiated with a boat company and water ski companies. and got things in play and had a concession with a couple local hotels up on Lake Tahoe.
Oh, I love
And
that.
yeah, so I've always had that ability. I've had a public relations firm. I had a citywide concierge service in San Francisco. So I just have that DNA in me for some reason. And I know that it can be hard, it can be challenging, it can be a quote, a grind. And I also know it can be super easy, right? And the way that it becomes super easy is doing what I call ad-libbing, which ad-lib is an acronym for advancing divine love in business. And it's the loving yourself, it's the loving what you're bringing to the world, it's the loving on your clients. And when we come from that place, fear can't get in to our existence. And when we're in that place, everything is possible, right? Nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal exists in that space. And that's when we can loosen that chokehold of we're going to succeed. Even if there's more month left at the end of our money, because it gives us a faith to keep on keeping on.
Right. No, that's so well said. One thing about SMBs, the SMB space, the small business space, there go my banking acronyms. I can never get rid of them. You know, we are facing a lot of unknown. And I also feel like it's an interesting time. If you take a small business owner 20 years ago when the digital age wasn't as prominent, perhaps it wasn't as easy to do certain things that they are today because of automation and so forth. But you also had less, I guess, information to create anxiety, fear, uncertainty about the future, right? Like, unless you really dug into like hundreds of periodicals a day and listened to the news, which as a small business owner, you're already, reaching many hats and don't have time. In this digital age, I have noticed that when I talk to individual business owners, a headline will panic them. An action, a political decision. There's a lot of stuff happening in the world of information that I think is very different than it was a couple decades ago, maybe even a decade ago. Do you see this challenge? And how have you changed maybe some of your leadership practices to help small business owners in this phase?
Yeah, this this goes actually back to one of my mentors back when I was, transitioning from high school to college, and he used to say, "Believe none of what you hear and half of what you see."
Yeah.
Okay, and yeah, let that sink in for a second. And so I coupled that with my major in college was journalism, right? And so it was about writing news. And back then, even back then, you know, the news was reporting the events without the editorial. And actually, you'd get kind of in trouble writing stories if you were kind of editorializing or putting opinion. But that's changed. But even back then, one of the assignments that I remember is they gave us the facts and they said, okay, write 5 different perspectives on these facts. And it was like, you got where, this person did this to this person and turn it all the way around where it looked like, total victim swap on the whole thing. And so when I got that message that, what we're seeing in the news is an agenda. It's not ours, it's somebody else's. So I kind of dismissed news and I didn't even follow that route after I graduated. And so what we have to recognize is, and I don't watch the news. I just flat out do not watch news. If something is that mission critical important to my success or my well-being, it'll find me, right? But I don't need to go looking under rocks for crap. So I don't follow the news. The social media, it's an echo chamber. So I'm going to find those chambers that are going to contribute to my success and well-being and happiness rather than contaminate my success, well-being, and happiness. Right. And, people don't realize how much time they're allowing that stuff to creep into their existence. And to your point, back in the day when we didn't have all the social media, we read periodicals, but it was mindful. Like, am I going to pick up, this garbage rag of a magazine or periodical, or am I going to find something that's worth my time? Because it's my time, right? We have to manage social media the same way. And, there's times where, I'll jump onto Instagram or something like that and just kind of get caught in the scroll hole. But I set a timer for myself, right? I don't go longer than 10 minutes of it because I know what they're doing to me, right? I'm on this side of the screen. There's 10,000 people on the other side of the screen creating algorithms to keep me sucked in. I
Oh,
know
yeah.
that, and I still
Yeah.
get sucked in.
Yeah.
So set yourself a timer, right?
Right. Yeah, no, totally. I 100% agree. And it's interesting because, it's not all negative. It's also positive, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah, absolutely.
today's digital age has created so much opportunity for us to be more efficient and better and have knowledge and get to even immerse ourselves maybe in a topic that we couldn't before. I laugh. I teach at the university, and it's so funny because I tell my students all the time, hey, today you can go to Google. Now Chat GPT, I was like, some of us, we're only as good as an encyclopedia or a book. And I grew up in a country where even the books were censored. So I was literally only as good as the book that was allowed in the country that I lived in. And I was like, imagine the whole, like the narrowness of knowledge, right? And so
Mhm.
we are blessed to have all the knowledge, I guess, but it's also a very, like you said, you can get into a rabbit hole and it can be
Yeah.
very dangerous if we allow ourselves to be in there. Yeah, totally. Um, I have a question for you that you probably are going to have to think about, maybe not. um, what is something that you believe in that maybe isn't so popular with the masses?
Oh, wow. Um, I'm going to say it this way is all is well. Everywhere on the planet, at all times, all is well. Now, there's a lot of things going on for a lot of people, and it's hard and it's challenging, and there's death and there's all of that. All is well in here. And we choose where to focus our attention. And where we focus our attention creates the energy of what we feel. So if we're going to watch a news story and something, and I say this with the deepest love and compassion, we could watch something that's happening on the other side of the planet, and it will affect us. We'll feel bad, right? And we wish like hell it's not occurring, but it's on the other side of the planet, and it's one report of what's going on. So if we're going to choose and allow ourselves to get upset over that, then I challenge you, check in with everything that you judge is wrong going on in the world and just wallow in that for a while. No one will do that. You're selective with your attention. Now, there's just for every negative event that's going on, there's positive events that are going on. So where are you placing your focus? So based upon where it's like a camera, right? If we move the camera, it's going to tell a different story of what's going on, right? If you point it down at the chicken poop in the rose garden, it looks like shit, right? Pardon my French.
Yeah,
We're
no, you're
married,
right.
right? But if we
Hey, that's why we got a
lift
podcast. You can say whatever you want.
okay, if we lift the camera up and we see the beautiful rose, that's what the experience is. So our experience is the screen that the camera is projecting onto. Okay. Now, this is where it gets a little challenging, and I do get some pushback, and that's okay because not everybody's going to be my ideal client, right? Or want to be, quote, in my tribe. With that information, we are projecting that information out. So if we see chaos and mayhem and anger. Guess where that's all coming from? Inside. Okay. And I know that firsthand with people very, very close to me, even people in my own household, right? They can get tipped over emotionally big time. We see it in politics all the time. You know, um, I'm very neutral in my politics. To me, it doesn't matter who's in office, right? It doesn't affect my life. It really doesn't. Okay. But there's certain people that somebody gets elected and oh my God, their world falls apart just from that perception or news. And it's not the election that did it to them. It's what they're telling themselves about the election that's going to affect them that causes, right. And people blow themselves, they annihilate
Yeah.
themselves.
And I can see how
Based,
you get pushback on this completely, because people are
yeah.
probably like, well, then how are this and passion about certain topics? And you know, I also, challenge myself sometimes, because I also I'm a passionate person, and, certain topics and world events get me really riled up. And I think one of my biggest lessons, which, individuals like you that teach it really help us. I started channeling my passion into action. I was like, if I am so triggered by such an event, what can I do that's in control in my life to make some sort of impact, right? Like, for example, this may be a small example, but I, grew up in the financial services industry. At certain points in certain segments, there weren't a lot of female minority decision makers. And, I did spend some time really always kind of in my head about how unfair it was, and it's so not fair that the finance guys can, got this pass. And it was just, at the end of the day, sure, it was maybe true, but it didn't matter. All I was doing was holding on to a coal that was burning my hand and really damaging my growth. And so when I learned to channel that energy into maybe me becoming the coach and the influence, and then also developing programs that help women and help with awareness and diversity and inclusion in the workspace, I really felt, one, maybe more content. I accepted the outcome that was in front of me, and I was able to go through it. I feel, maybe this isn't the right word, but elegantly or more eloquently in life. And I feel like that was just, it was a game changer. Don't get me wrong. There were days I had to cuss it out, or, go to a kickboxing class. Now my solace is doing meditation and yoga, and I'm so much happier than punching a bag to get all of it out.
Yeah.
But we're
But
not perfect. I just want everyone to know, like, we've all been there,
yeah, we're all practicing human beings, right? So, but I love what you're saying because I 100% believe with what you're talking about, where there are going to be those things that are out there that, yes, on some level, we've projected that experience. And if we're passionate about something and it's got our attention, then, and we're called to it to make a difference, by all means, you've been tapped on the shoulder to do that, right? Follow that energy for sure. And my acid test to it all is, when those things happen, am I working on this or supporting this cause out of fear or out of
Mm,
love?
yeah, that's a good one.
And right. And so, here's my vision for the world, right? And I'd love your opinion on this, but check it out. If everybody, for just a minute, if everybody on the planet could feel in their bones and in their entire being that they were enough just as they are, and there's nothing to fear, that all is well, what chaos would exist?
We would be living in a very different world.
Yeah.
And that is why the words you just spoke is the reason people admire children and their creativity and their ability to be fearless at times, because they haven't yet been exposed to societal norms and judgment and fear of failure and all the things that we end up being conditioned to fear as adults that hinder hinder a lot of things, mainly peace. And it's a sad reality. It's a sad reality that we continue to feed on our emotion. We continue to feed into propagandas. That is the reason in 2023 we still have war. I mean, it is ridiculous. We are evolved human beings, but unfortunately, technology has evolved. The human brain has yet to evolve. And Machen, that is why people like you exist, to help to help individuals get back onto that core, because it is very easy for us to derail off of those thoughts or not even think about it. It's easier to act on emotion. It's easier to live in a world where you are accepted, right? Okay, I have a statement. Tell me if you believe in it, true or false. An old dog cannot be taught new tricks.
False.
Okay, explain.
So an old dog cannot be taught new tricks.
Right.
So I'm saying an old dog can be taught new tricks. It's not necessarily new tricks. It's new neuro patterns.
Love it. I knew you were going to go there.
It's our life, our existence, our experience is nothing more than a pattern or a routine.
Right.
Right. And it's, I'm not going to get into the whole neuroscience of it.
I know, but it's so fascinating about how you can literally re-alter the motherboard of your brain.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a conditioning process, right? And most people, I'm real big on affirmations. And, some people kind of roll their eyes and go, I've tried it, it doesn't work. And I say, well, try this affirmation for 30 days and let me know how it goes. And the affirmation is, I'm unhappy, sick, and broke. Okay. No one ever takes me up on that, because there's a part of them that thinks maybe it would work. And that's not what I want. But here's the way with affirmations. It is reconditioning a belief, right? And the belief system, or the BS that we're swimming in all day that we don't even know we're swimming in, is what we've got to be mindful of. I call it going to the gym, GYM, meaning guide your mind.
Oh, love
because
that.
If we're feeling fear, or we're feeling like, I could never be a millionaire, or I could never do that, it's just a belief. And the belief is nothing more than repetitive thoughts that create a sense of certainty. So what we want to do is we want to unwind that, redirect it to a different direction, and then start to condition that new direction, right? So what we've got to watch out for is tipping off the BS meter, right? Because sometimes if I'm sitting, and I'll just use this one, if I'm sitting in front of a mirror, and currently I weigh 172, and I'm telling myself I weigh 150, I weigh 150, I weigh 150, I weigh 150. BS. I can see it. I can see the results on the scale, right? It doesn't work. But if I say I'm excited about the idea of weighing 150, it takes my brain to a whole different place.
It takes your brain into some action, solution. How do I, rather than why am I, right?
Yep. And so we can turn affirmations. We want to buffer them a little bit if they're setting off the BS meter.
Right.
But then also we can turn them into what we call an ask-formation.
Ah.
How can I be 150? Yeah. Why can I be 150?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Not that I want to be 150. I'm totally happy with where I am. But it's like, a lot of times people, just to give you an example, it's like, there's clear evidence, like a number, right? We can measure it and it's not happening. Let's ease into it. Let's buffer into it.
Right. No, that's a very good point. Do you, you're so well versed, in your reading, in your knowledge. How do you do it? I mean, you're a busy man. You've always been busy. You've always been an entrepreneur, always doing multiple things. Like, how do you bring in knowledge and keep your mind sharp the way it is, because it's very admirable. And, it's also another common phrase I hear from a lot of people. Well, I don't have time to read, or I don't have time to do this, or who has time to do that, right? So how do you?
Great question. The morning routines that I talked about earlier, one of my morning routines is I read for 10 minutes, at least through the day, right? So I'm always doing that. And it doesn't, I do read because I like reading. And I also, I'll call it devour a lot of books on tape, right? So when I'm going for a run or I'm driving, drive time, it's not
Machen on Audible? You're
yeah.
aging yourself now with the tape.
Did I say tape?
You did.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, back in the day, even, gosh, going way, way, way back.
Audio tapes.
Yeah, Nightingale Conant, I'd buy their tapes, a set of like 12 cassettes, and I wore those things out, and a lot of it is repetition, listening to it over and over and over. And there were times where I'd listen to somebody and it's like, I'd probably listen to it 10 times and it's like I'd hear something new every single time. So that kind of taught me that, it's really about a study or an immersion. It's not like, okay, read that book, done. If you look at the books that I read, they're like dog-eared and highlighted, and I've got notes written in them, and for me, to your point of how did I get here, I'm just blessed in that I get to do for a living what I really love and am passionate about. So for me, it's not like, do I have time? It's like, I want to read. I want to get information that, one, confirms the direction I'm going is the right direction and how I'm helping people are the right things, but also what else is new and improved or a different way. And here's the news flash, right? One of the books that I read about a year ago, and I've read it a couple times since, are the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius.
Oh,
right? Actual
okay.
journal.
Yes. I've been wanting to dive into that.
It's a great read. And, the stuff he was contemplating 2,000 years ago are the same things that, are the Instagram, Facebook bumper sticker quotes. It's the same, just a little different twist. So for me, that kind of is evidence that there are universal truths. So I'm really just a student of the universal truths.
Right. I love that. I mean, I always say an open mind is the most knowledgeable mind. And I've also started challenging myself in maybe picking up a podcast, an Audible article written by somebody that I may not admire or have the same opinion as. You see, we gravitate towards like-mindedness, right? That is a very common human behavior. And I am now being more purposeful in reading things that my initial thought may not be in agreement with, or maybe even I'm grotesqued by. I'll be honest. Like there are some individuals that are out there that are very bold and maybe have very strong opinions about certain things, and you have some certain triggers, and you're like, oh my God, like what is wrong with that person? But I now sit and listen to it, or I read it, and I'm like, why? And why is it varying? And should I be upset? And should I change my thinking? And I feel like it's making me, I'm changing. I am changing. And I am proud of that, because I realize there's certain moments that I'm sitting and I'm actually thinking a little differently. I'm like, oh my God, like this isn't what I would do. I would have said 15 years ago, and that evolution of mind, I think, is just beautiful. But I feel like you have to not fear challenging yourself. It's like anyone that's very religious, and I know this is probably a topic we shouldn't talk about, but I started asking this question because they will, a lot of people who are into a certain belief will not pick up a book of another philosophy or belief, and I'm like, why? What's going to happen? You're not going to combust. Like,
Yeah.
what do you fear? Like, what are you fearing? Like, learn it, read it, see why they have a certain perspective. We'll probably have less hate in the world too, but
Oh, yeah, for sure. No, I agree with you 100%. And, you know, with regards to looking at things that, quote, maybe trigger us or we think are, wrong or not good, if you will, I look at it, Joseph Campbell used to say, it's in that deep, dark cave that we fear to go that has the treasure we're looking for.
Oh, yes.
Right. And so that deep, dark cave is in here. So when we see something out there that triggers us or that we judge is wrong, all that means is we're not looking in here and we're taking that shadow, projecting it out onto the world or onto somebody else. And so, there's a saying that says, when you spot it, you got it.
Right.
If I see something in you that I am disgusted by or pissed off at, that's in me somewhere.
Right.
I'm doing that same behavior on some level, in some way, shape, or form,
Right.
consciously or unconsciously. So for me, and this is one of the things I try to help my leaders work with too, is when that happens, that's a great road sign to say, okay, where in me does that exist? How can I clean that up in me? Right. And it may not be where, we see, people doing terrible things to other people. And I'm not saying this like, well, if you see that, you're doing terrible things to other people. Here's the newsflash. You're probably doing terrible things to yourself, mentally or emotionally, maybe even physically. And so when you see it there, that's just a mirror to say, look inside. And how can you clean that up? And once we accept it in us and put that shadow in front of us so we can work with it, now it's not a threat. But when it's inside and we can't see it, it's the boogeyman. And we're in fear because we don't know what it is. So one of the things that I always go to is, in the world of information, the universe of that information with something, there's like let's call it 100%, right? We know about 10% of that.
If that,
right?
Yeah.
If that. And there's about another 10% that we know we don't know. And then we bounce around in that 20% thinking that's the universe. Well, like 80% is what we don't even know we don't know. Right. So down here, we're playing in false confidence, right? When we know, confidence replaces fear. Our real power is in letting go of what we think we know, and jumping into the unknown, right? Reading somebody else's information that we despise or can't get our head around, right? Because we're going to see it differently just because who we are, but we'll pick something up that's like, oh my gosh, there's a nugget of gold. There's that thread of light in the universe that I can follow. And it's really an amazing journey, but it takes fear out of the equation, because if we're afraid of what somebody's written or what somebody said that has no meaning anyway,
right,
except for the meaning we've put onto it,
exactly.
we got to get clear with ourselves first.
Yeah, that mental clarity is so critical. And it's a journey. Like, it doesn't happen overnight. So we learn it, and it's critical. And that's why my new focus, and I'm so proud of this, because I have been wanting to do this. I've been talking about this for maybe, I would say, the last 15 years. And I had too many fears, honestly, stopping me from going for my passions and going for things that I knew I wanted to do, because I feared, how, like, things that I should not fear. But I also grew up in a culture where women, were taught to be nurturers and safe. Not that it's wrong, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But now you're sort of preconditioned, and you got to uncondition your preconditioned brain to be like, no, but I can do that. And it's okay if I'm not on top of the world for 2 years while I'm resetting, or whatever it may be, and that, if I want to follow this outcome, I might have to accept certain other outcomes in my life, that I might have to lose certain things or distance certain things or whatever it may be, right? Like there's so many fears, and fear of failure, right? So many. I have been working on this. I teach this all the time, and I realized that I had to look at the weeds in my own backyard. And I guess, I spoke about it because I wanted to be a certain way, but I realized maybe in my inner self, I wasn't. And I was too much of a perfectionist, and I did fear failure. I did, period. But I spoke as if I didn't. But I totally, like, I am okay today being completely 100% vulnerable and saying, I feared failure. And as much as I spoke about how I wanted to and how I wanted to do it and how I'm bold and this and that, at the end of the day, the reason I never took a step was because I had fear. I had fear of not being idolized as being the superwoman that I was, that I wasn't idolized as being, a perfect and a career Manal and mom Manal and wife Manal and daughter-in-law Manal, and daughter Manal was just, always there, like perfect, and I did. It was a very hard truth that I had to tell myself. And then I've been on an emotional roller coaster. I've been like crying all the time now. I'm like, oh my God. But like your point, I think allowing myself that realization is changing. I'm not going to say it's changed, but it's changing my energy, and it's changing what I'm able to accomplish. So you are very spot on in what you're saying. And I've been facing it recently.
Yeah, and we all do. We all will continue to, right? My belief, right? I don't know this to be absolutely true, but it resonates. Is I don't know, here on planet Earth, I don't know that we'll ever be exonerated from, okay, I'm okay with fear. I'm okay with failing, because those are things that keep us alive. Nobody likes to fail, but a lot of people that are very successful go, okay, failure's part of it. It doesn't feel good, but if I can learn something from it and move forward. So for me, right, we all have a recipe or a formula of what failure means, right? For some people, it's like, if it's not perfect, I failed.
Right.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I wish you well with that.
Yeah.
But for me, the only way I can fail is if I give up, and two, if I didn't learn something.
Right. If you don't fall forward.
Right. So it's really hard for me to fail. Now, there's a lot of people out there that will say, oh man, you pooched it.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because, they're busy, getting off on that, where I'm like, okay, I'm in my lab coat, my clipboard, and what worked, what needs work, and moving it forward. It's so what, now what? And if we can get to that place, it makes life a lot easier, because we'll accomplish more, right? We stay in gear rather than, you can't navigate a parked car. We got to keep moving, and we're going to get feedback from the universe of you're on track or you're off track.
Right.
But if we're not moving because we're afraid to move,
right,
we're not going to get the feedback.
Right. And that's the key. You just got to keep moving. Take a baby step. Like, it doesn't have to be a big leap. Take the first step, because I feel like that gets you kind of, free from a little bit of that fear. And you're like, okay, baby step, confidence, now moving. Okay, now it's okay. Bring it on, baby, and you kind of move in this line. This has been such a great session. We could talk for hours.
Oh, I know.
I feel so energized on this Friday morning to have talked to you, really. I am going to link not only your site, but the books that you have written. I think they are inspirational. I've grabbed a couple, so I can't wait to dive in myself. Are there any parting words that you would like to leave us with today?
I just want everybody that's listening to really know that in this very moment right now, and it's never not now, you are enough, and all is well.
Boom. The words from the great Machen. You need to write a philosophy book. Like, you have to. like a all-in like philosophical book that somebody's gonna pick up, 20 years, 30, 40 years from now, they'll be like, you remember that philosopher?
Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. I appreciate that.
I appreciate you being on the show. Thank you for tuning in. On each episode, we will continue to bring on successful, dynamic individuals to dig deep and share stories that will inspire you to power up your life. This show is packed with unrivaled storytelling and no reservation advice. Tune in now by searching Power Up with Manal wherever podcasts are found. Please show us just a little bit of love by leaving a review and hitting that subscribe button. This helps our small production get reach and voices heard globally. Let's power up together, baby.